Hi, this is Simon Obstall and welcome to another tutorial for Apple Motion. And today I'm going to be showing you 5 tips for creating better neon. Now, it's not going to be exactly this scene. I'm literally just going to go through the tips, but hopefully you'll find it useful anyway. So let's make a start. So first of all, a quick checkup on our project settings: 1920, 1080, 24 frames, 10 seconds long. So you're probably thinking, what's all the fuss about? I've got my text, I've given it an outline, I've given it a color that I like, and all I need to do surely is to come over to Filters, Glow, and grab Neon, and job done. But I'm going to suggest that we can do a lot better than this. So let's first of all delete that neon and look at step 1. First of all, I'm going to take this group and I'm going to make a clone of it. So right-click, make clone layer, and I'm going to turn off the original group. And the reason for that is if you ever wanted to come in and change our text, it's sitting there in its own group and everything else is going to follow along because we're going to be using clones. So I'm going to turn off the original group. So let's talk about neon. Obviously, it's made up of tubes. And the thing about tubes is they're not going to go around sharp corners, and our text has got a lot of sharp corners. But we like this text and we want to stick with it. So what we can do about softening off the sharp corners? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take this group, we're going to come to Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're also going to come to Filters, Color, and Levels. And we're going to set the Gaussian blur amount to 64. And then in the levels, we're going to switch from RGB to alpha. And then we're just going to bring these two controls together like this. Not all the way, because we want to keep a little bit of softness. And immediately you can see we're in a much better place because all those sharp corners are now rounded off and we're much more in a kind of neon zone. So that's step 1. Let's talk about step 2. Now, the thing about neon is that, again, it's tubes, and the tubes are discontinuous because we need to be able to feed the neon in and the electricity needs to run through it and so on. So they've got to have an opening in those tubes where they begin and end. So to do that, we're going to come back to our original group here, and we are going to select the rectangle mask tool. And I'm just going to draw a very small little mask like that. And I'm going to come over and set the blend mode to subtract. And now, as you can see, we've actually got a discontinuous tube. And because of the process we've applied upstream of that, we've got a really nice rounded edge to that opening and closing part. So then we can just duplicate that mask, right-click duplicate, and we can move it over to here, duplicate it again, move it over to here, duplicate it again, and let's move it over again to that position on the N. And we should probably also duplicate it one more time and move it there on the O, because again, that should be a discontinuous tube. So that's step 2. So next we can in fact add filters, glow, neon, and we've got a much nicer result. And one of the things I want you to notice is that our tube is not evenly lit, and that's again a really nice thing. Because of what we did with the Gaussian blur and the levels, we've actually got sort of areas of different transparency, and that's created this really nice effect. I'm actually going to dial down the mix value of the neon to around 50% because I think that looks better as well. So let's move on to step 3. Now, the other thing we know about neon is that it tends to flicker. So how are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to come down into my original group there that's got my text in it. I'm going to make a new group and I'm going to put the text into that. And then with that group selected, I'm going to come down and select the rectangle mask tool. Just going to make sure my overlays are turned on, and I'm going to draw a mask for the letter N. And then I'm going to duplicate that and move it over to the letter E, just making a little adjustment like that as required. Duplicate it, so that's right click or Command D, depending on what you want to do, and then move it over so we've got the letter O selected. Make just a little bit adjustment to its scale. Command D to duplicate one more time, and now we've got the N selected. So now we've got all the letters. And what we can do is we can use these masks to create our flicker. So I'm going to select the first one here. And what I'm going to do is simply come to Properties, Opacity, and Add Parameter Behavior, Wriggle. I'm going to set the amount to 4 and the apply mode to subtract, because we want to subtract from 100%. And I'm going to crank the noisiness all the way up to 1. And now we should be able to see a little bit of flickering there on the N. So then I'm just going to hold down the Alt or Option key and copy this onto the other layers by dragging it like that. And each time I'm going to click on the random seed to give me a new value. Alt or Option, drag it onto the next one, click on the random seed. Alt or Option, drag it onto the fourth one, click on the random seed. Now together, we've just got this really nice subtle flicker, and it's different on each of the letters. So that's step 3. So let's do a little bit of tidying up. I'm going to close up these groups here. And then this one here, I'm going to call base text. And this one I'm going to call main. Now, before we talk about step 4, I'm going to add a camera. But to do that, I'm going to create a new group. And I'm going to put my existing groups into that. And now I'm going to switch this group to 3D. And I'm going to add a camera. And I'm just going to come to the rotation, have a little bit of Y rotation like that, and a little bit of X rotation like that, just so we're looking up at it. Now, just turn off the overlays so as not to confuse ourselves. Now, one of the things that Neon has very often is a kind of backplate, so like a duplicate of itself in the background. So let's make that. I'm going to select the main group and duplicate it and put it behind the main group and call this secondary. And I'm come to its properties, transform, and I'm going to move it back 75 pixels on Z. And then I'm also going to reduce its opacity down to, say, 60%, or maybe even 50. And now we've got that nice secondary effect. It's looking much more like real-world neon. And then if we move our camera around, we're getting this really nice parallax from that extra element. So that's step 4. And finally, step 5 is about giving our neon sign something to sit on, so it's not just floating around in space. So to do that, we are going to come to our assets folder and import the thing called brick wall. And I'm going to drag this out into a group at the back there, which is 3D. So I'm just going to scale this up a little bit. Let's go for 65%, so it's filling the frame. And now this is obviously not looking good at all, but that's because we need to add a light. So I'm going to select my color for the light just by picking the color of my text there. Let's crank the intensity up a bit to 150%. Now, the other thing we want to do is this group here, which has got the neon in it, we don't want to be affected by the light. So come down to lighting and let's just turn that off. Now we've lost our background layer, our secondary element, because we need to move this brick wall back enough to accommodate it. So I'm going to move it back -80 on Z. And now our secondary neon reappears. And the other thing we obviously want to do is we want to give this light a bit of a flicker. So we're going to come to its intensity, add parameter behavior, wriggle. 4% is probably fine. Let's switch to add and subtract. And again, let's crank the noisiness up to 1. And the net result of that is that the light on the wall flickers and everything is flickering just a little bit. And what we could do is, let me just reset that Y transform of the camera. We could add camera sweep, and we could go from -15 to 15, and then we get this movement around our neon sign. And I hope you agree that those steps taken together have allowed us to create something that's a lot more interesting and has a lot more finesse to it. So thanks very much for watching. I hope that was an interesting one. Hope to see you again soon.